Okay, AP Human Geography students, here we are in our final unit, Unit 7, and this is part of 12.3. The first part, we're learning about central place theory, range, threshold, market area, and the hierarchy of different settlements. So let's get started here and talking about, make sure you have read this part of the key issue, otherwise this isn't going to make a lot of sense to you. So if you haven't read this part of the key issue, please pause this and read so that you have a little bit better understanding of this. So we're talking about central place theory. This is Walt Christaller. He was in the 1930s in Germany, and he created this theory to explain the distribution of services. So again, von Thunen, he explained the location of agriculture practices. Weber, he explained the location of manufacturing and industry. So here we are with Christaller's explanation of the tertiary sector. How does a provider decide where to locate his or her service business? So again, purpose of this, how does a service decide where to locate their business given the goal to maximize profit by minimizing costs? Just like a farmer, just like a manufacturer, any business owner, the goal is to maximize profit by minimizing costs. Not just to make money, no, maximize profit by minimizing costs. So in order to do this, they must determine how far people are willing to travel for that service, that business. And then they must determine how many customers do they need to break even. Break even means that you're just literally covering your costs. So this would be the cost of manufacturing, or the cost of, sorry, not manufacturing, the cost of running your business would be, as long as you can make those costs, then you just break even. You don't make a profit, you don't lose money, you just truly break even. However, that's not what a business wants to do. The business wants to maximize profit by minimizing costs. So what do they need to do? How many customers do they need to be able to do this? So they need to determine what is the minimum, what is the, how far people are willing to travel for their business, and what are the minimum number of customers they're going to need. So when we talk about service, this is the tertiary sector. Again, remember, services are in the tertiary sector. So when we're talking about services, we're talking about any activity that fulfills a human want or need and returns money to those who provide it. So it's any activity. So it's not a product that's been manufactured. It's not a resource that's been extracted from the earth. No, it's an activity that is provided to an individual in return for money. Example would be the person who makes your food at Chick-fil-A, to the person who cuts your hair, to the person who sells you your Justin Bieber tickets, to the doctor who's checking up on you when you're sick. All those are services, to the service I provide, which is educating you. And a settlement, these are permanent collection of buildings where people reside, work, and obtain services. That's what a settlement is. So just some basic background there for you. So let's talk about central place theory. This is they identify the location and the distribution of services given the pattern and hierarchy of settlements. Excuse me. So they explain the location of services in different size settlements, given that every business wants to maximize profits by minimizing costs. In order to do this, they must do a market analysis in order to determine their optimal location. So what is this market analysis? How do they calculate their market analysis? They do this by calculating their market area. First, they must determine their range. Second, they must determine their threshold. And we get into a bit more of the range. The threshold is here. Let's start here. So when we talk about size of settlement, this is what determines the number of services available. And so the market area, which is determined by the range and the threshold, the market area is the area that surrounds your service. They did this in a hexagonal shape. And the size of this shape, the size of the hexagon, the size of this market area is calculated by the range and the threshold. So here we have our hexagon. And at the center, we have what we call our central place, or our market center, or what really is our service. So this could be our Publix supermarket, this could be your barbershop, this could be a Gucci store, this could be a Rolls-Royce dealership, this could be our classroom, whatever the service is that's being provided, that's its central place. And then surrounding it in a hexagon is its market area. All this area in this hexagon, this is the area around which people are willing to travel for that service. Once you get outside the boundary here, that means it's too far. People aren't willing to travel to get that service. So if you're out here outside the boundaries, that means it's too far away. You're outside the range. So in order to determine this market area, and the market area is this hinterland here, or what we call the functional region, or the market area. So the hexagon is the market area, or what we call the hinterland, or what we call the functional region for this service. And the range is determined first. And the range that determines the size of the market area. So the size of the market area is determined by the range. And this is the maximum distance people are willing to travel for that service. So this is the maximum distance that somebody's willing to travel for that service. So let's say this is the Tijuana Flats on Aloma. This hexagon would be the maximum distance a person would be willing to travel for that Tijuana Flats. If you get outside here of your hexagon, that means it's too far away. People, it's just not worth it to them to travel that great distance. That would be like someone from Gainesville wanting to travel to Orlando in order to go to a Target store. Well, that's just ridiculous. It's too far outside their range, their market, their size of their market area. Then once they have the maximum distance people are willing to travel, so everybody within this market area and within this range, everybody's a potential customer. As long as they're within the range, they're a potential customer. Now we must determine our threshold. And the threshold is the minimum number of people that they need to support the business, the service, in order to break even. And if it's below that threshold is below the break even, then they're going to go out of business. If it's above that break even, then they're going to make money. So again, when we look at the range is what determines the maximum distance somebody's willing to travel for that service. So that gives us our hexagon. And then everybody within this hexagon, that everybody is a potential customer. So then we must determine the threshold. How many people do we need to support our business in order to break even? And at the center of this, again, is what we call the market center, or the central place, or what's called the service. Okay, that's the actual service. And so when we talk about high range, this means that people are willing to travel a further distance. Typically, you see these in more specialized services. This would be like a major university or a specialized doctor or maybe a major concert. Low range, this means that it's a shorter distance. This tends to be a common service. This would be like a 7-Eleven or a Publix or maybe a local high school band concert. High threshold, this means that you need more people in order to break even. You tend to see this with stores that have large square footage, like department stores like Macy's and Bloomingdale's, warehouse stores like Costco and Home Depot and Walmart, where the product tends to be cheaper, so they work on volume. This would also be like large spectator sports like major NFL football games or like the NASCAR, the Daytona 500, where you have over 100,000 people there. That's a high threshold. And large schools, same thing. Low threshold tends to be small square footage. You tend to see this with more expensive goods. This would be like a Gucci store or a Rolls-Royce dealership. So their profit margin is really large because they tend to be more expensive. So again, a high threshold, that would be like if you went to a Claire's, then you're going to buy a necklace. Low threshold, that would be like a Gucci store or a Louis Vuitton store or a Tiffany store. And so again, high threshold, these tend to be also stores with cheap goods like a 7-Eleven or a fast food store as well. So back to the previous slide. So when we talk about our hierarchy of settlements, we talked about a little bit in the intro slides that these are the types of settlements we have: hamlet, village, town, city, megacity. Hamlet is the smallest. This would be like 800 people. This would be like that map that you looked at would be like St. Francisville, Illinois. Then village would be like Lawrenceville, Illinois. And then the town would be like Vincennes, Indiana. And then the city would be like Indianapolis. And then megacity would be like Chicago, Miami, New York. And so as we go from hamlet, village, town, city, mega city, you'll tend to see less of those types of settlements in total. So like there are more hamlets than there are villages, but there are more villages than towns. There are more towns than cities, but there are more cities than mega cities. And then as you go from hamlet, village, town, city, mega city, the distance between them is greater. So the distances between mega cities is much greater than the distances between cities and then the distances between towns. The number of low-range services will increase, where you see the greatest number of low-range services will be in megacities. So you'll see a lot more 7-Elevens and McDonald's in a megacity than what you'll see in any of the other. But also the number of high-range services increases as well. That's because for, let's say, a Gucci or a Louis Vuitton or a Rolls-Royce dealership, a person's willing to travel a lot further to gain those services. So those are typically located in your cities or your mega cities. People tend to travel greater distances to go to services that are in city and mega city. Also, as you go from hamlet, village, town, city, mega city, you see an increase in population. You'll see an increase in the number of services that are available. You see more services that have a larger market area because you see more high range services and more high threshold. You see more access to wealthy customers because you have more wealthy people living in mega cities than you do in your hamlet, as you saw in that road like view of St. Francisville. And you see that the service is not available. You'll travel to the next largest size settlement. So if you don't find it in your hamlet, you'll go to the village. If you can't find it in the village, then everybody from that hamlet and that village will all go to the town. If you can't find it in the town, all the people from the surrounding hamlets, the surrounding villages, and the surrounding towns will go to the city. If you can't find it in the city, then all the people from the surrounding hamlets, the surrounding villages, the surrounding towns, the surrounding cities will go to the mega cities. So if we can't find what we need here, then we're willing to go to Miami to find those. That's our closest mega city. So when we talk about the general trends, again, there'll be a regular spatial order in the number of central places of different population size. You'll see very few large places, but a lot of small places. So you'll see a lot more hamlets in this country than what you will see mega cities. And you'll see a regular spatial order in the spacing. So the large places will be relatively farther apart, just like Miami's a lot farther from Atlanta and a lot farther from Washington, D.C. and a lot farther from New York City and a lot farther from Chicago. Well, whereas small places will be relatively close together, like our hamlets and our maps that we looked at. St. Francisville was very close to Billet, which is very close to Mount Carmel. These are all very small settlements. So they'll be a lot closer together. And then as you get to the larger, they'll be further apart. Let's talk about some of the criticisms of the central place theory in terms of explaining location of services and location of settlements. So technology's really changed the availability of market area for lots of products. So now we can shop online. We have satellite radio, cable, and satellite television. So that has increased the size of the market area. So the range is much greater because we're not necessarily traveling to it. It's actually just being delivered to us. There are physical barriers. He assumed a flat terrain with no physical barriers. So whenever somebody says, okay, I'm going to go to the next size settlement, where somebody might be willing to travel 20 miles rather than 10 miles because that 20 miles might be shorter because they don't have to go over a mountain. You have better transportation, road systems, and access, and so it's faster and easier to travel. So in Cristaller's day, he was talking about people traveling on foot or by a more primitive vehicle, so it took a lot longer. And also we see urban sprawl where cities have spread and they have grown. So this idea of the hamlet, village, town, city, megacity around major settlement urban areas doesn't apply. So you couldn't say anything like Maitland, Winter Park, Dr. Phillips. We're all suburbs. We cannot apply this hamlet, village, town, city, megacity to an area that is more of an urbanized area without break. That's why we use that example of St. Francisville, Lawrenceville, Vincennes, Indianapolis, Chicago, because you still see some of that in like the more rural areas in the Midwest. That's it. Thanks, guys.